Hello and welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our last expert panel of the season, as I've just been telling our panelists, and today we're going to be talking about Off-White. It's the first Off-White panel we've done, so I'm very excited to dive into this conversation. But before we do, I'm going to let my illustrious set of panelists introduce themselves. Karl, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Karl Plewka. I'm a fashion stylist and editor of Beauty Papers magazine.
Hi, I'm Shandopaul, and I'm the Director of Strategy at Edger.
Hi, I'm Leanne Elliott Young, co-founder of Communis and a creative consultant.
Hi, I'm Rhea Dillon. I'm a casting director and photographer.
And I'm Lara Johnson-Wheeler. I'm features editor at SHOWstudio. So welcome, everyone. I think that the main thing that I was thinking about when we were thinking about Off-White was really where to start. It feels like there's so much to get into. But really, I think I want to ask about Virgil himself, because it does appear a bit that the cult of personality, the cult that Virgil has created around him, sometimes overshadows the brand itself. And I want to ask my panelists their opinion on this. Are you interested in Off-White as a brand, or is it Virgil? Shand, I'm going to look to you first.
I guess like Off-White, whilst it can be like considered a brand, I guess itself is the culture, and Virgil is more of, I guess like he's just the leader of it, in the sense of like, whilst there's clothes and there's products, there's also a language. There's also like this idea that, you know, it's like all about being inclusive and really driving like streetwear to a point where it can be like accepted into like the bigger just realms of Paris. So as much as like just Virgil like has this like huge hype, like Off-White is like still a very it like still like takes a step like above him, because it's not just him, it's everyone around it. It's the kids, it's the people outside in the frenzy. So yeah.
So it's bigger than Virgil.
It's bigger than Virgil.
It's interesting you said about him being a dealer, and I think there's something around that. The fact that he like deals, well, exists in this space of like cultural osmosis. He feeds off of that and feeds it back. Like my questioning around it is he? I mean, I absolutely agree with what you were saying. The way that he creates this language and is talking to a certain consumer and he's engaged in that space. But I feel that he's almost like dealing this kind of nuance of fashion back to them, but with the vernacular of like a high-priced luxury item. Where does his worth? Is there the worth of a luxury fashion sphere? Does the price point justify the product?
The product.
Is there a falsehood in what he's doing? Going, hey, this community, this astonishing community that is engaged because he exists within it, he breeds it, he's part of that space.
He's a leader in it.
He's the leader in it, yeah. And you know, is it the Pied Piper and the Emperor's New Clothes, or is it somebody who is the Warhol of our times? And I'm struck as to what the difference is.
Yeah, I guess like
it's so exciting to talk about, isn't it? What is it?
I guess like him being like a Moses, in a sense like the clothes are like expensive and like price high because he's like really trying to like drive his people to like be accepted in like a high house, in more of like in regards to like Gucci. It's like he wants them to be able to like sit like right next to them.
He wants to elevate to
luxury level. He wants it, but he's like trying to bring everyone along with him. And so it's like priced at like that like just level, just for that. But he really wants to like drive this entire like group of kids. And just when I say kids, it's not like a 12-year-old. It's like from like 15 to like mid-30s. He really wants to like drive them up with him.
And the resale market now, like I was speaking with lots of stores that I can't kind of name, but stores that kind of work, that have done various collaborations and drops, and they go into the queues and they have to kind of you only had one token per person, and there's kids who are just saying like, look, before I was selling drugs, now I'm selling sneakers.
Yeah.
That's actually, he's created this like secondary sale economy, which is astonishing. Like, actually, kids aren't selling drugs, they're selling sneakers. That comes back to the whole meme thing that he's obsessed with.
Yeah.
Like, that's astonishing.
Well, that's culture as well. Like, it's like, don't forget that he did come from like Chicago, which is like an like insane environment. So to even like drive kids to like stop selling drugs, like weed, not like hard drugs, and like move.
There's a lot of money in it. Trainers, not selling drugs. Guys at home.
And like move over to sneakers is like such an interesting just cultural like shift, because like it's great. A black kid from like Croydon, he used to sell weed. He got inspired by like just Virgil, and now he's on to like just like moving off-white sneakers. That's doing so much for like that small boy or kid. It's crazy. But like that's what it's about. It's like all about the people around him.
But I don't know if it is even a cultural shift, because that young kid has always been obsessed with the trainers and the hype of that kind of world. So it's actually just a change in the way in which to get to that lifestyle that they're trying to get to, and what Virgil's trying to push to have these kids part of this lifestyle and having it priced at that. So it's like, instead of selling these drugs, you're actually safer. You're selling trainers. You're selling things that your friends and everyone actually really wants and loves. Like, I met a kid who flipped some trainers for 10K, and I was like, what? And they are really young. They're not just they're not just like 15 and above. They're really young. And sometimes they do scouting in the Keys as well. Like, they're super young kids, but they've got such know-how. And I think Virgil's way of even flipping old fashions and old art as well and making it a trend, that's just showing into them to flip what they've got now and be like,
There's Virgil effect as well. It's not just, it's happening with kids and trainers, but I was saying before about, so Virgil and Takashi Murakami have recently collaborated on an exhibition that's showing at Gagosian on Davy Street.
Mental. It's Gagosian. It's like,
We're looking at the pictures of, so this is the exhibition, but when I saw the pictures of the kids queuing around the block for the launch, the Virgil effect seems to have had this change as well. That's a cultural shift, that the kids who would be queuing around the blocks in Soho for a Supreme drop are now queuing around Davy Street. And simultaneously, I got calls from the fashion editor at SHOWstudio this morning, Georgie, who's at the show last night, and there are queues around the block, police blockades. So what is it about Virgil himself that is creating all of these shifts? So particularly, I'm interested in this movement into the art world, and doing things with fine art.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess with like Murakami, it's more so like that. Like, that's like, I guess, a streetwear god. Like, don't forget, like Kanye. He was like the first one to try to street work at him, and it's probably like the first time these kids like actually get to like go and like view actual like real work by him, and they get to do it with, I guess, like their favorite like streetwear guy, and like and that just allows like an like insane amount of like access, and again, like, it's back to this culture of like inclusion, back to this idea of like democratic like fashion, and really changing the whole like just movement of where it's going.
But this idea of inclusivity that we're all attributing to Virgil and Off-White, we still have to remember that the pieces that are showing in Gagosian are going to sell to buyers for, extortion.
But the worth is the Instagram moment, and that's it. And we live in this digital age. And I asked a friend of mine, Yolo Lewis Edwards, who is working with a group called Fashion and Fuckery, and it's really interesting the space that they've got. So they kind of asked a question, a poll, like, what is Virgil, and their opinion on him. And lots of these young kids came back, and the conversation was all around, or the statements around, he's the first person who understands the internet in that sphere, in that fashion sphere. And in the same way, Gagosian has always been the forefront of kind of working in a polarized space, but introducing into the gallery sphere, we now live in a digital image-rich age, which is what the Instagram, social media hype. But you know, flick through these pictures, all of them. I mean, there's going to be a few slut drops in front of that flower, you know, and it's kind of like, but
I saw that happening.
yeah. Really? But the great point is the traction that that one has with the artwork and the press release, which is a good 7 pages long, which I hope everyone has a good read of. And the fact that he introduces like language in a really specific way, you know, he juts in and out of, you know, talking about cultural reappropriation and architecture, and then just like the everyday, like using his like symbols of, you know, and being able to, his first like few Twitter kind of shares of those, you know, those symbols, those lines together, immediately you look around you and those lines are on the street, that, you know, they're in the braids of your hair, they're kind of like, you know, they're on your ring, they're on the patterns you've seen in your lifehood, and that then in turn you become kind of linked to his, like what he's delivering.
Yeah.
And I think that
The prominence
I think
of
it's
the
because
product.
what he's delivering is actually what he's taking straight from the street straight away. So his understanding of the internet and modern day of like snapping it straight up, it's live.
Yeah.
Like he's taking these lines and he's just putting it out there. There's not necessarily deep, I'd say, researching all these like different ideas, like what do the lines represent. It's like, I've seen these lines, this is relevant, put it out there. Even like going into his language, the quotation marks, you know, it's just, he's kind of playing on
The
this
irony.
modern and irony, kind of Duchamp vibes. So it is really interesting, and he's just being really relevant and straight.
he's being really relevant, but he's being very aware.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like, you know, everything is like a structured, you know, it's a structured engagement. Like he's understanding that will then imprint in this way because he understands the process. Like I was also having a conversation about his SS18. There was the top that was kind of a very basic lace off the shoulders, and there's a whole theory that the reason, like on Instagram, if you put breasts up, you get a lot of likes. But you're not specifically allowed to put breasts up unless you have something veiling them, a hand, a lace, etc. So here's number one, Off-White's going to get lots of clicks. Number two, breasts get a lot of clicks. So like creating him understanding those kind of that data around how to pinpoint what gets traction and drive means that the lace top, you know, it's so interesting that how
It's calculated.
yeah.
Well, I'm interested that, you know, the product does get this level of traction. And Karl, you said previously that you weren't necessarily so aware of Off-White as it was coming up, but you were conscious of what was happening and the product.
The product, yeah. I mean, this is really great, this conversation, because it's informing me a lot more about him, because I wasn't that sort of aware of so much about what he was doing. And I guess as a fashion stylist, we have so much information to go through when it comes to the shows. We're kind of inundated, and if we're not at the show or styling the show, we're looking at it online.
Sure.
And I tend not to, and I think a lot of my colleagues would be the same, tend not to overanalyze. It's more like flipping through and, you know, getting a sense of the, you know, the silhouette, the fabrications, the colors, whatever. And so this is so interesting. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that he has time to find the time to be a fashion designer, because being a fashion designer is a completely consuming occupation. So I am very interested in him, and I do admire him, and I think his enthusiasm, obviously, for creativity and for culture and for all this reappropriation that he's doing is quite phenomenal. Whether or not I mean, I'm slightly older, I'm not a millennial for sure, but I have a slight problem with this. I mean, I read that Edward Enninful had described him as being a Renaissance man, and I think that sometimes the trouble with today is that we are all expected to be Renaissance people, and we can't just do one thing. I think I remember when Karl Lagerfeld first started taking photographs, everyone was very dismissive, and it took him a while to learn how to do it properly because he was doing it on the job. But, you know, he got better, and I feel like the trouble is when you're doing so many things, it's not always easy to do all of them really well.
Arguably, that's one of the biggest criticisms that he's receiving. And, you know, in his last press release, I think he referred to himself not as a designer but as an artist. And he's, you know, as we've been discussing, you know, he's done these collaborations, and he's been working with. He was at the Copenhagen International Fashion Fair, curated by Stavros, and was, you know, working with Max Lam and Sami Janja, actually. You can see now creating these IKEA DIY chairs, and he was in that booth for days. And it's an interesting critique, because arguably, you know, that's a great accolade that he's doing all of these things. But when you're talking about a fashion brand, is the brand suffering?
It's in a different sense. I mean, I was watching a video, you know, and he was talking about the cities he travels and how much time he has, and the fact that his mobile phone is where everything is live. Like exactly what you were saying, he's feeding, he's looking around, he's feeding into that, and it's going back to the team. I think in a modern day sense of what a team is you. Hopefully, you'd have someone that can incubate an idea and that can work on that intense detail of what is you know, not just the texture, not just the way that the cloth moves, but who that person is, and really spend some time with that individual. And I think if we're looking at these now, I cannot sense that, unfortunately. I feel like
who the girl is.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like he probably hasn't been near the woman that might want to wear this, or close to them, smelt their hair, or been in bed with them. You know, I just don't get any. Had dinner. I just don't.
Well, that's the fundamental problem with a runway collection. You have to know who the woman is or the girl, otherwise it's completely lost. I'm not going to say anything more about that, but at the moment, I think that with the show. It doesn't move me, but it doesn't offend me. And I think, because, like I said, as a stylist, I'm looking for things that I can use. And I never look at a runway show and go, okay, I'm going to take look 5, 6, and 10 and, you know, put them in a fashion image exactly as the designer intended it to be, because what I like to do is turn things around and twist it and make it my own in the image. But I think there's a lot you could do with this collection.
We're looking at the collection that showed last night.
Yeah.
Now, and I think that, so what is quite obvious is that there are models walking who he has worked with and has spent time with. I wonder.
Well, the casting is what completely elevates it. I mean, he's got a huge amount of very expensive runway models in the show, and they're either being paid a lot of money or they're friends. And I'm assuming they're friends, a lot of them.
They're fans of the brand.
Fans of the brand,
and they understand the traction and delivery you get by being associated with the brand. But I do think, I was just ruminating on that idea of, you know, in times of past when you would purchase something and it would be about the moment you'd have where us two would engage, and we'd, you know, I'd feel a certain way, and you'd observe me in a certain way, and you'd understand what I was wearing. Whereas now, the only point of reference is, I was kind of, I suppose, thinking about how that feeling is now the feeling when you get 1,000 likes. It's like changed almost. It's like, you know, you wear something, and that moment of me feeling splendid and really excited about my, you know, how the cloth feels against me, and like the look that I've put on, and the way that I've dressed. Now, unless it's in that pictorial plane of a mobile phone screen, however big yours is, unless it's there and it's got that accreditation.
Is that validation?
Validation, yeah. Whereas I
think it works in both ways though, because you have the first part, which is the likes and the internet and everything and the things you're seeing, and then when you get it as being like a street head, when you're on the streets and people acknowledge you, like you kind of get that little nod, kind of like the black.
Is any of this on the street?
But
I don't think
it will be on the street. That's the thing. Like even with the trainers that's in whatever look at it.
But I think it's his I think it's the shoes, the menswear. If you look in the stores, what's stocked, it's definitely not any of, you know, his women's wear doesn't. I feel like he's disrupted that space where he's got a runway so that it can feed the price point of the rest of the collection. It's the other way around, which is really interesting. It's fucking genius. Sorry, it's really early to say the F word. It's absolutely genius. He knows he has to do a runway. He knows he has to do a set amount of looks. He has to have those models. We need to be having this discussion, and then he can drop all of the.
Exactly. No,
It all does feed into it.
I mean, I would wear some of those looks though. Yeah, it's a
Slightly
couple.
more looks this season, hasn't he? I think it's been a bit of a longer show.
Would you say?
I think so. I'm not sure.
The show was like 8 minutes, 9 minutes.
I mean, it seemed like it had
Maybe we
like
can
about
watch the show.
45 looks or something. It's normally smaller, isn't it?
It did seem to, actually, you're right, it
Yeah.
did seem to have quite a few more models.
I mean, he repeated silhouettes quite a lot, which is not that acceptable in Paris. It's more of a Milan thing. But we should look.
You made a good point. It's almost like the show is meant to be like a bit of like wit. It's like there just to like drive the like trainers and the menswear and like really get that crowd again and just like build it up for the next drop.
He's showing he can target both.
Yeah.
He's showing that he can have this big show in Paris and have all of the most illustrious fashion editors sitting in the front row and put the biggest models of the current day on the catwalk and still
And like, look at all the phones going up straight away.
Exactly.
And no one's actually there.
there's the validation.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that word validation, I think that's quite key to Off-White and to what Virgil's doing. It's that the sense of moving upwards, the sense of struggle, and this here, watching this show.
Yeah, it's like awareness, validation, and then he has the, excitement and drive, and then there's a purchase point. Nobody, even my 10-year-old niece that we were talking about earlier, who's dictating the last show.
Yeah, sure.
Kira.
Shout out.
Yeah, shout out. She could afford something from Off-White. He does the USBs, he has the socks, which are sold out.
Yeah, there are price points you can get into.
Everybody can be a part of it, which is that inclusive, but also still resonates with exclusivity, which is a really difficult thing to do, which I think he's kind of winning at.
It's a potent cocktail, that idea of inclusivity.
Because perhaps it will just get, he'll exhaust it.
But it's become, I mean,
Yeah.
do you think it can be exhausted that? It feels like arguably, yes, he's spreading himself thin. But I don't
think he is.
see
I don't think he
a-
is,
Yeah,
yeah. I don't think he is. I think that would undersell what he's trying to do,
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
he is about. Like, when I did the quote for System, I was like, he cannot be, like, rivaled as a creative. Like, he is a creative director of all these, so many things. He's got all these things that he's working on, and he's nailing all of them.
Yeah.
Let's be quite honest.
But I don't think
see
he's
a
nailing.
lack.
I don't think he's nailing this.
But then actually this is a play to how he can get all this other stuff pushed out.
Right,
So
exactly.
actually
But
how
at the
he
same
wants
time,
this
if you're going to do a
operate, he's
Paris
working
runway
out
show,
right.
it's got to be right. It's got to be right, and there's mistakes all the way through this
There's
show.
a falsehood in
Things
it.
don't fit.
But
The
I don't-
proportions are
That's what
wrong.
there's
This
so
is
I mean,
difficult because
you
I
know,
don't think he's using the show to be right in terms of the old fashion concept. This is
Right.
the show to be,
But
I'm
then-
doing a show, I'm taking everyone up here,
But then
I can do this.
At some point, my exhaustion was more like at some point going, will the industry, I mean, I know we all know the rumours of Vuitton, and I think that's his trajectory, and that's where he'll probably sit. But exactly, I mean, so many of these, the back shots that killed
Yeah,
me.
terrible.
I was like, yeah, how does he, you fitted this woman, the breast, like the bag strap here, all
The
of
bag
it
strap I
interrupts the form.
noticed, yeah.
All of it, like the fabrics do not gel together. They oppose one another, which is
The dresses, the
awkward.
proportion is wrong. And a
Yeah,
lot
and
of
it's
them.
like, I have real difficulty with how everything fits in the breast. There's an emptiness underneath, I mean, apart from the spray on cat suit, I mean, great.
But why?
But the exhaustion was more that will at some point, will it be, are your double quotation marks actually taking the piss out of that sphere that he's stepping within? But how can you, that's really bad for it, but how can you have a Paris runway show that has so many mistakes?
I mean, I think is the show for his fans or for the editors? Because people will be in Paris. They won't let things like that go. I mean, this outfit with the horse on the green T-shirt and the corset, that's not a runway look. That just looks like it's been thrown together. I mean, it's not a proper silhouette to go into a runway show.
Virgil's always said it's not about the consumer. It's about the consumer, so it's not about the gatekeepers. Which is
Yeah.
She's got something hanging out the bottom of that. I mean, it's just messy. It's clunky, and for me, I mean, I probably am old-fashioned, but I just find it's not acceptable for someone to send things that aren't properly finished, fitted, etc., quite messy looking down the runway.
It's really interesting, that idea of acceptable, because I think what he's saying he's trying to do is push against what's acceptable. And I think when he first started and he would come to Paris Fashion Week and was turned away.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is a classic. This is a really sort of classic runway show. There's nothing. It's
not subversive.
No, there's nothing subversive. There's nothing groundbreaking about it. It's not, we've seen it all before. We've seen equestrian. We've seen it through Helmut Newton, through Hermes, through many lenses. But this to me, if it was something really out there and interesting with a really great new silhouette, then maybe we could forgive a few mistakes. But this is a very conventional runway show. It starts with the sort of sassy little, sort of short number, like with the corset and stuff, and then it goes through to sort of floaty evening wear. It's very conventional. I mean, he almost should put a wedding dress at the end.
But then is what's subversive the background to this? Is that's what it's supposed to be, and as a Black American designer from Chicago showing in Paris, as going back to the beginning of this conversation, is the brand, is the point of Virgil, is the point.
I'll tell you what it is.
Not about the clothes.
It's a meme.
But about the story.
It's the whole thing's a meme, which is what he delivers in. That's what he works with. He says, I want to create memes. It's like Virgil Abloh at Vuitton. Ooh, that's a meme, and it's happening. Like putting that many mistakes on the runway, is that a meme? I feel like.
Do you think that's conscious?
I think that I would love to have him really spend some time.
It feels rushed.
Yeah, on actually, because I feel like he's doing so much, and I think he is a Moses of our time, and I do think he's possibly a Warhol of our time. I do actually strongly behind what he has delivered and how he has disrupted so much of the systems, and I think he should be watched and notated, and is extraordinary. But I would like to see him spend more time on his clothes. And what would happen there.
Rhea, what do you think? You're looking a little sad.
No,
I'd be excited.
I still think that it's just not being understood, but then that's also part of what he's trying to do. He's trying to juxtapose this idea of having these instant things and just putting it out there. Like the fact that this, in your terms, is not finished and is on this classic Parisian catwalk. This is the juxtaposition. This is what he's doing.
If it's not fitting the model,
if it's not fitting the model, that's another side. That's the stylist side.
I mean, I'm all up for anything new and out there, groundbreaking, but mistakes on the runway of any city, any show, it's just not acceptable. It just isn't.
I feel like even this dress, this one that's behind.
That looks like he just threw it in, the frothy dress.
I imagine if
This one?
Yeah, so
the one that he's done before. He did that silhouette before.
This one, I think that if the way that the cloth is hanging and walking, there's a lot of motion, and then you get the back view. If there was a couple of more cuts here, it could have had a lot more volume. I feel like just a little time nurse in it, and
I agree with the fact that I feel like if he did have maybe another person in a pattern cutter or had spent some more time on learning more about the craft, it could be elevated even more.
Even more, yeah.
But
yeah.
I still think what he's doing here is still important and challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'd like to see more.
Is he good at delegating, do you think, or not? Or
I wonder.
yeah.
You've worked with him.
A small bit. As far as I know, yes, but it's more so as Ray was saying, is the clothes the actual point of Off-White? Because I really don't think it is.
No, they're not. Yeah.
The fact that he's doing so much chairs and he's working with IKEA and he's making USBs.
Byredo.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wonder if they met. I wonder if they met there over the Swedish meatballs and just decided they were both doing IKEA. They were both doing IKEA collab at the same time. They were
The system in
hey, yeah.
But it's just is the point not to have that frenzy in Paris again? Because outside of the show, it was insane.
But then, okay, but I do understand that, and I'm so interested in this idea of him constantly being misunderstood. But if the point is not the clothes, then why have the brand? What's the point then?
Because he's making money, he's selling to those individuals. Yeah, he's hyped the beast, basically.
Well, why doesn't he do something? Why doesn't he do something which is more about luxury streetwear, which is what I thought he was supposed to be about, rather than trying to do this sort of weird kind of like slightly Riccardo Tisci, Givenchy, Hermes.
His brand is a faux luxury brand. That's the statement as well.
But the brand is like...
There's many contradictions, aren't there?
Yeah.
Well,
The brand is like it's like a banner. It's like, he said, I think it was either at like Harvard or Columbia. It was like it can be like anything. It can be like off black, off red. Like the whole point of this brand is like, it's just a banner that people really sort of like gather like underneath. And then he's at the forefront, really driving it forward. So
that grey space.
yeah.
One thing that I do want to bring into the fold is this idea of copying and appropriation, and the copy and paste aesthetic that Virgil has argued that is what he does with his brand. And there are a number of times that he's been accused of copying. Quite recently, he was visited by the fashion warriors that are Diet Prada when Kim Kardashian posted a picture of herself on Instagram, the big tulle dress, and Diet Prada nodded that it was very similar to a Molly Goddard creation. And there's an anecdote that I read about that when Virgil showed at Pitti, a journalist said he was showing a jacket that had a zip in the back, and the journalist said, you know, Yohji's been doing this for 10 years, how can you be creating something that's such a copy? And Virgil's response was, if I didn't know that Yohji made that jacket and I had no idea, then how could it be a copy? I wonder what we think about Virgil's attitude to copying.
Good artists copy, great artists steal, right? Picasso?
I just think we live in a time of copying. I mean, it's like the internet's made everything so referenced. It's impossible not for people not to copy, especially if he's so busy with other things. He's got to have some kind of mood board going on. You know, he can't just, his ideas do not come out of thin air. You know what I mean?
He's creating an algorithm, effectively. He's delivering exactly to the...
And I don't have a problem with him copying stuff. I think if he does it, if he reappropriates it into his own voice, I think that's fine. I have a problem with things not fitting properly. Sorry, I could go on about it.
Rhea, what do you think?
I think there's copying and referencing has been it's been playing on each other for a while now, and people trying to distinguish what is which. Exactly. And also the point was like, if you'd done this zip, like even me and my friends, obviously we're friends, we talk about the same things. We have the same ideas at the same times, and it's like, oh crap, I was going to do this.
But that is cultural osmosis when you're in the same space.
That's kind of the idea of like what is going on there. Is that copying? Am I stealing from you just because I thought that? Or it's just, I think it's a really difficult thing to pinpoint. And
I mean, everyone does it. I mean, I used to work with Vivienne Westwood, and she was obsessed with Saint Laurent and Dior, but the old versions of Saint Laurent and Dior. So that was a massive influence on her work, and she did it. I mean, why can't he? He's just doing it, and it's a lot more sort of up to date, isn't it?
And there are actually companies. We're in a time now where machine learning and AI is a part of our, vocabulary, and there are actually companies now which, based on algorithms and data, can actually map the consumer and feed back to the consumer in the same, echo chamber without any nuance of creativity, exactly what they need and what they want, mirroring their desires.
Is that what Virgil's doing? No creativity, but it's a mirror? Shando?
No comment.
What did he say in response to that again? He was like...
He said, I didn't know that Yohji ever did this coat, so how can it be copying?
How can it be copying? Even like down to like that, just language, it's like again, that's something you really expect, like a young kid like who like has like a streetwear brand, just to say, and so again like he's like really like targeting like that specific just consumer, and it's like a matter of like it may not be the right thing, but he really like knows like where like he wants like this like product just to go, and
he knows a sweet spot.
He knows a sweet spot.
He does, and he's very quotable.
He's very quotable.
These nuggets. Obviously, you've referenced the System interview, and obviously his big thing is the quotation marks. He's always putting out these, golden quotation marks that do just really, really appeal to a young audience.
Display only, I mean, they're quite
It's the quickness as well to digest it, and that's what social media is. It's like, it's an image, it's this quote, like,
Little
you
black
can get
dress.
it straight away. Everything's quotable because
But then-
everything needs to be
but then
understood now.
There's a deeper point where, you know, he's referencing Dadaist feminism and, you know, the creator of the urinal, like casually on his women's wear. I love that. I was like, is he chucking that one in? Yep, there it is. He's like coining references that are so, well, not obscure if your mind or if your education's in that space, but he puts like, he battles with the two, which I think is really interesting. Like it's the same we were saying about the Gagosian. Some people might just be there doing an Instagram moment, but they'll be next to art, they'll be within it, and then all of a sudden that's part of their, you know, language, and their
The introduction he's done it. He's taken them to that world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting the way that Virgil highlights education and is looking at, you know, his referencing and particularly fine art. I mean, he said that when he was studying engineering and architecture at university and went and did a history of art lecture, he walked in and he learned about the Renaissance and it changed his perspective. And this is something that I think he wants to bring to people. And I wonder...
I'm just thinking, I wonder then if he spent more time with, you know, that he went to that one Renaissance lecture and, probably not one, he probably then read up on it.
Taking the words right out of
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. If he spent time, if he spent time with the
osmosis.
yeah, exactly. But if he spent time with, you know, the clothes in that way and really...
Well, you know, I wonder exactly if Virgil just spent more, maybe a bit more time going deeper into those concepts and
But
deeper
maybe we're
into those
expecting
ideas.
too much of him is too early. Because technically, what is it?
is,
Fourth season?
It's been like 4 years.
Yeah,
It's been
4
around-
years.
yeah,
Yeah.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And you know, some designers have been around for so long, and he's learning kind of almost on the job, like you were saying with Karl shooting. And so maybe he will come to do that. And it's great that we're all excited enough, you know, we're on his ship, we're like ready. We're like, Virgil, when you're ready, we're ready almost.
But I think the trouble with that is a lot of designers, when they're young, they become famous very quickly sometimes, and they're judged on those early collections, and then they kind of go into like a lull, and then they've got to keep the momentum going. So it's interesting what you say, because it does feel slightly like he's learning on the job, and I think that if he can pull that off, good for him.
Well,
Good for
let's
him.
look to
Why
the
not?
future for a moment. Obviously, there are these rumours flying around about Virgil going to Louis Vuitton and succeeding Kim Jones. But what would we like to see? I love asking this question on panels, but what would we like to see Virgil do next?
The deep level of understanding of a luxury fashion house and him spending, like nursing those moments, like the extraordinary fabrics, all of the support and the pattern cutter.
Well, he could go to Vuitton and have an amazing design team.
Exactly.
I mean,
We'd like
Kim
to
is
see him
obviously
delegate
completely
more.
immersed when he was there. Was completely immersed in the label. But I mean, maybe he would be able to be more of an overseer.
And Kim, in a similar fashion, you know, all his collections were so relating to his holidays, like he'd snap everything, you know, so it's kind of, it's that same way, it's that same method.
Well, they are, you know, they are friends and they do.
And Kim likes a collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. Virgil, of course, we haven't even really, you know, he is the king of collaboration.
Yeah.
It could be really good. Who knows?
Shando, what about you? What do you want from Virgil?
I mean, like, of course, that move to like a higher, like fashion house and deeper sort. But like again, I just think like that. The clothes, the consumer that like he's really appealing to, is basically like who's next in line. Like in like a couple years, they're gonna go into their 20s. They're gonna get like a bigger like spending power and. Just back to like just social media is, do they really need to like have stronger fabrics and stronger like just like
Hopefully they'd want to. Hopefully they'd want to,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
like-
because when you feel the difference, you felt the difference.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but then there's this like just matter of like they want to be inside of this culture.
Yeah.
And so like it doesn't matter like if you like have an amazing jacket or if you like have a USB that says like Off-White, it's like you're still like a part of this.
In that universe, yeah.
And so my main thing is just like, do we need to even worry about the clothes that much? And like I know it's not a fashion thing to say, but we do live in a time like where everything is so rapid that the consumer, they may not even pay attention. They just want it.
That worries me, though. I mean, that's like we're losing our sense of craft and, you know, you know, and you know, this is supposed to be a Paris show. I keep going on about it. It's supposed to be a standard of excellence. You know, that's what it's supposed to represent. And the brand, you know, whenever it doesn't fulfill that, I find there's an issue, and I hope we don't go down that road.
Well, if it is that, then why not all the veils that you use on like your Snapchat / Instagram stories? Can we not just press a button, have a Vuitton / Off-White filter, and that's the end of that? Then we can all just sit naked in our seats right here, and we don't have to venture out. If that's, you know, if that's not
note for future,
and we don't care how it feels.
You know, but, yeah,
I think it plays into the sustainability aspect as well. Because technically, we should be teaching these young kids that actually you should be buying to last you a long time. It's not this throwaway. But then also, when it comes to
6 weeks,
the drop, when it comes to the drops, they aren't throwaways. Like they are something that you'll covet and you'll keep. When the kids grow out of them, they're going to keep them on those shelves. You know. So actually, maybe he just needs to bring that up. Trade them, flip it. He needs to bring that up on this side as well.
So what we want from Virgil, we want Virgil to have a bit more time to really focus and work on the craft, but we'd like to see him push forward and be elevated.
With the Snapchat.
And maybe do like a men's unisex show. Maybe do men and women together. Make it more like what his world is, and less trying to be sophisticated lady, because that's obviously not his thing. And let's just see what he does really well. And I'd rather see that.
Some of his consumers into the show. Like,
I'd rather
really
see young kids in the show.
It's kind of improving upon
Boys, girls.
Like he does. But like it's like not in the sense of like a show. He brings them into work. That's far more like important than just like a show where he's gonna like just bring them in and then just let them loose and it's done. Like they actually like work for him.
So he doesn't just sensationalize them.
Exactly, and they get to like build like the brand and like build themselves, and that's far more important in my opinion.
So Virgil, if you're watching, take note. Plenty of notes.
Snapchat filter.
Get that fitting right. Get those clothes fitted right next season to you.
Plenty to think about from your gatekeepers. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And let's give Virgil a round of applause for giving us